And if the holy, holy way touched you, if there's something in you that when you hear, I want to live in a holy, holy way, a completely loving way, that within us which says yes, even if it says, but I don't know how, or but I'm scared, that part that rises up, that resonates, that is that part of us. That is the spiritual warrior, because we know what we're here about. Even if even if we're afraid, we don't know how to really do it. That there is in each of us that seed of the divine, that spiritual magnificence, that is the spiritual warrior, that is ready to stand. This month we are being awake to power, and we're being awake to power through that lens of trying on spiritual warriorhood, which doesn't mean we're going out and fighting against everything. What it means is that we are being a stand. We are allowing our life to be a stand for truth, for compassion, for peace. And if you have another quality or value that stands up for you in being a spiritual warrior, then maybe that's part of it for you too. But having our lives be a stand, living in a holy, holy way, having our lives be a stand for that. That it's also allowing all of our life, the highs, the lows, the boring parts, the great parts, the yucky parts, all of it, to be a vehicle for waking us up to the fullness of who we are. As a spiritual warrior, we recognize all of life is for us to help us wake up and be that stand. And being a spiritual warrior means, sometimes this is the hardest part, that if when we see stuff, people out in the world that we don't like, that we have issues with, that we go within first. That we check our own consciousness first and see, what do I need to become so that this life on planet Earth can be more full, more free, can more reflect the kingdom of heaven on earth. So that was a little review for those of you who were here last week and those of you who weren't. So that is what I'm calling being a spiritual warrior. And we talked a little bit last week about some kinds of things that support us in our spiritual warriorhood. And within that, there's something I want to talk about today that actually takes two of some of our unfavorite words. Those of us who come into New Thought, those of us who have fled organized religion or traditional religion, these can be words that have that independent-minded person in us shrink. And those words are commitment and discipline. See, when we think about our spiritual life, and the part of us that shies away from discipline, well, we know that's our ego who likes to think, oh, you know, I've prayed. I've had experience where I knew oneness, where I knew God was all there is. Okay, I'm done, I'm good. I can be in the world in a holy, holy way. Isn't it interesting that we can do that with spirituality, but when we look at anybody else who is following something that their life is about, they don't have an issue with commitment and discipline. Musicians know the way to Carnegie Hall is practice, practice, practice. They don't question that they need to do the darn scales every day if they're a piano player. That practice, that commitment to that kind of discipline, they don't even question it. They may not love it, but they don't question it. Athletes. Do you think there's one athlete with Olympic dreams or professional dreams that says, I don't need to practice more than once a week? I mean, seriously. Really? They don't question it. If they want to have the life of their dreams in terms of a sport, they are committed to the discipline of practice. So why do we think the spiritual life is any different? That our spiritual practice requires a commitment to discipline. It requires a commitment to discipline. So why? Why is it so powerful? Let's go there, just to satisfy the ego a little bit. Because if we're spiritually immature, and I've been there, and I go there sometimes, so please don't hear this as a you. But when we're spiritually immature, we think of discipline as bondage. I want to be free. And those of us, baby boomers especially, we think that freedom looks like no discipline and no commitment. It's what we're kind of a bill of goods we opened up to getting sold, I think. And our ego loves that. Yeah, I don't have to answer to anyone or anything. But those of us who either have dipped our toes into spiritual maturity or start moving into that, recognize that discipline gives us our freedom. And the reason that discipline gives us our freedom, it is that discipline of practice, of spiritual practice, that gives us authentic happiness that the world can't take away. There's a song, I don't know if it's a rewrite of a gospel, and I've heard it a couple different ways. I heard Sister Monica sing it. I've heard the Inner Light Choir up at Inner Light sing it, and it says, the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. This little light of mine, it's kind of a redo of This Little Light of Mine. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. And our practice anchors that joy, that happiness, that fulfillment in us. It armors us, if we want to use a warrior metaphor, it armors us to move out into the world. And you know what? When we create a discipline, we're creating a habit, and it actually makes it easier for us. Because habits are things we do repeatedly, and we don't have to think so much about them anymore. And our mind is always busy processing, figuring things out. So it loves to have things that it doesn't have to figure out. So if I get up in the morning, or if I wake up and go, let's see, what do I want to do this morning? Am I going to sleep for another hour? Am I going to watch TV? Am I going to get on the computer? Or am I going to pray and meditate? So if you have to take your mind every morning through weighing each thing, you're exhausting your mind before the day's even begun. If you just know, when I wake up, first thing I'm going to do, maybe you have your coffee already made, that's okay. You go do your spiritual practice. You don't have to go into the discussion and the analysis. You just know, okay, I'm going to do my spiritual practice first, because that's what I do. Do you know how much more peaceful that makes your mind? Do you know how much more energy you have for the things you really need to be and engage with and decide about the rest of the day? So just having that disciplined practice will give you a more peaceful mind. Your brain loves that. But secondly, and this is tied into that authentic happiness, Jesus said it this way, or told, or tried to talk about it this way in one of his, it's like this, folks, aka parable. He said, there was a man who built his house on sand. And so a storm came and the foundation of the house was washed away. He said, why did this happen? There was another man who built his house on a rock. And when the storm came, the house did not get washed away. And that's where that idea of building a firm foundation. And when we have that discipline of daily practice, it creates that firm foundation that no storm will shake. Because the spiritual life, and especially when we call it being spiritual warriors, does not guarantee nothing bad will ever happen. We know this. We'd like to think in somewhere, some way, somebody never had heartache after they became a practicing whatever, religious scientist, a practicing New Thought person, a practicing spiritual person. But stuff happens. The difference is when we have the discipline of a daily practice, whatever shows up does not rock us off that foundation. The discipline becomes that rock for us. It creates that rock for us. Now, we all have different ways that we like to do our spiritual practice. And if you want some ideas, you can talk to Reverend Cindy, or you can talk to me afterwards. We can give you some great and simple ideas. But today, I want to remind us that there's an easy, I don't know if it's easy, I'll say a simple place to start having discipline. Or it's a reminder of the simplest place we can start having discipline that we often forget, but once we remind ourselves, once we remember this discipline, then very quickly our life gets realigned. And that is having discipline in our thinking. Where we think, our life follows. We cannot ever think that spending our time thinking about what can go wrong and how screwed up things are and how annoying my neighbor is and how wrong that other person is going to lead us to a life of satisfaction and fulfillment. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Dwelling on our problems is not going to get us beyond the problem. Peace Pilgrim, who many of you have heard of, she was an older woman that walked across the U.S. with pretty much nothing and depended on the kindness of those whom she encountered to feed her, to take her in. An extraordinary woman, an extraordinary spiritual warrior, named Peace Pilgrim. She said it this way: if you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never again think a negative thought, never. If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never again think a negative thought. This isn't a new idea for any of you, I know, but we forget this all the time. Which I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I love about our Science of Mind teaching and other metaphysical and New Thought teachings is that we say you can control what you think. We have the power to shift what we think. When we catch ourselves thinking along pathways that, as one of my favorite teachers said, circle the drain, circle the toilet. When you see those thoughts are just following down into the rabbit hole, you can change them. We can change our thinking. We're not victims of our thinking unless we stop being awake and paying attention, which we do, and then we remember and wake back up and start paying attention. We get into thinking what Merriman and Morrissey, a great New Thought teacher and minister, calls indulgent thinking. It's those guilts, those regrets, those woulda, shoulda, couldas maybe envy. We get on this spiral. And if our life follows our thoughts, what are we going to have? More things to be envious about, more things to regret, more things to feel guilty about. That doesn't lead us anywhere. Self-recrimination does not lead us anywhere. And in the process of indulging in this kind of thinking, I mean, I love that word indulging. It's like when we indulge in that fifth brownie. Oh, maybe it's that second for you. We indulge in that fifth brownie or that second bag of potato chips or whatever it is. Indulgence, we know it's something we've let ourselves do that does not serve us. So that kind of thinking is something we allow ourselves to do that does not serve us. And you will find, if you pay attention, if you catch yourself on the train of that thought and check in and say, how am I experiencing myself? How am I experiencing life right in this moment? And we will find there is no aliveness there. There is no creativity there. Our indulgent thinking has stifled any creativity, any aliveness, any passion, and truly any power. Any sense of power we might have. I mean, try this at home, but set the timer for 5 minutes, please. Try this at home. Start thinking about the mistakes you've made in life, or the things you feel guilty about, or whatever. And after 5 minutes, do you feel more powerful? I'm betting no. I am betting no. On the other hand, if we catch our thoughts and have our thoughts go toward our highest life, what would bring us satisfaction and fulfillment? The love that God is, the love that we are and want to be, the compassion we desire to expand in ourselves. Even if we just did something that we went, oh man, that wasn't compassionate. And you can bet I have some of those because I'm supposed to be perfectly compassionate at every single moment because I'm a minister. Guess what? I'm not. Who said, So once I catch that, if I start going down that indulgent pathway of beating myself up, that is not how I rearm myself in my warriorhood. Rather, if I catch myself and recommit to, have the discipline to recommit to the compassion I want to be, that's a lot more likely to get me there. If I put my mind on what brings me alive, where my passions are, and you have to define them for yourself. Where are your passions in your creativity, in your relationships, in your cooking, in your art, in your teaching? If you put your mind where your passions are, then your life starts moving in that direction and you will feel yourself more alive and you will feel your power waking up. Because when we put our minds on what is in essence the divine, our deepest joys are the divine impulses in us. And so when we put our minds on that divine power can flow. Isn't it nice to know that God doesn't work through guilt and shame and regret? I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. So in being a spiritual warrior, we have to have the discipline to wake up to our thoughts and redirect them. So we have a wonderful choice. We have a wonderful choice to say, what am I going to be committed to? What discipline am I going to be committed to? Am I going to be committed to a discipline? Am I more committed to being a victim whose life doesn't work? Or am I committed to trying on this thing called spiritual warriorhood? Am I committed to my smallness, living a small life where I don't bother anybody and nobody bothers me, and I can sit on that which keeps knocking at the door of my consciousness to emerge? Or do I commit to opening up to be my spiritual magnificence? These are the questions that we must ask ourselves, because they're being asked all the time internally. Our soul is always asking them. And we can stay asleep and push them down, but that's not the way to live a healthy life, and it's certainly not the way to be a spiritual warrior. Because in this, we have to remember that the universe meets us at the point of our commitment. If we are committed to playing small, the universe will say, okay, and bring us more ways to stay small, to stay powerless in the world. But if we commit to that fullness of life, to being a spiritual warrior, to being a stand for compassion and truth, to being a stand for love and joy, to having a life of fulfillment and meaning, we commit to that and claim that and have our thoughts in alignment with that, the universe meets us with that and brings more opportunities into our lives to be that and experience that. That is simply the way it works. It's not rocket science, it's just the way it works. What we claim for ourselves, what we make a habit of claiming and knowing, is what the universe will bring into our lives. That is the law. That is one major way that God works. So in every moment, we have the choice. In every moment, we have the choice of what we're going to put into the universe for the universe to bring back to us. We know this, but we need to get reminded. We know it because we forget. I forget. We forget, it's no big deal. We forget, and then we wake up. We make a mistake. Oh, I could have had a V8 in my thinking. No, I've just spent 20 minutes thinking about what I'm going to say to that person when they show up, and I'm going to show them how right I was. We make a mistake. We get back on the road. Some of you know the word repent. In Hebrew, meant getting back on the right road. It didn't mean, beating yourself up for the rest of your life because of a mistake. It means getting back on the right road. Jesus said to the woman, go and sin no more. Just get back on the right road. Make a mistake, you get back on the right road. You fall down and you get back up. In Buddhism, there's a saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's acknowledgement. We all do this. We forget who we are. We forget that we are here to be the love of God, to be those spiritual warriors of the truth of God. We fall down and we get back up. In Christianity, there's a saying that says a similar thing. A saint is just a sinner who fell down and got back up. So, no worries about our sometimes lack of ability to be spiritual warriors 24/7. That's not the point. The point is to wake up. The point is to get back up when we need to. And it's wonderful to have spiritual community like this where we can gently, lovingly remind each other. And where we can tell each other when we've fallen. We say, great, I love you. Can I assist you in getting back up? So, let's go within and know that I am so grateful there is that power and presence that is 24/7. There is that power and presence that is love, that is truth, that is exquisite peace, that is clarity, that is harmony, and that actually is perfect freedom. And I know that power and presence 24/7 is always available, is always broadcasting that truth. And so, right here, right now, I commit to the discipline of tuning in to that broadcast. Of every time I realize I've gone to another broadcast station that I open back up, turn myself back to that presence of God, that presence of life. I return my thinking to that road of truth, that road of wisdom, that road of compassion and love. And knowing that just as I cannot outgive God, I cannot fail God. That presence will be there to lift me up, to help me get up when I fall down. And it is not counting. That infinite is not counting how many times I fall. It is only welcoming me as I get back up. As I once again stand up and recommit myself to being a spiritual warrior, to being the truth, the compassion, the love, and the peace as best I can. I am so grateful that this is fully available to me and for me. I give thanks and release this word, and so it is.